Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday, August 8th, 2024. Born on this date in 1961, former Auburn and NFL tight end Ed West of Colbert County. Today, we have a plea in a Walker County jail inmate's death that was big news last year. We also have Birmingham citizens speaking up and helping out on crime. A big summer for the Gulf of Mexico's dead zone. And John Hammontree and I are going to talk national politics and how they might affect the state's politics. And we'll go over a news review quiz. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. A Walker County Jail corrections officer who was charged in last year's death of Tony Mitchell has agreed to plead guilty, reports AL.com's Carol Robinson. Now, you might remember that Mitchell was arrested on charges that he shot at deputies who had responded to a welfare check on him. Accusations of his poor treatment in jail included severe neglect and the withholding of medical care. The plea agreement states that Mitchell was often without clothes, wet, and lying on a concrete floor covered in feces. Corrections Officer Joshua Connor Jones pled guilty to 2 cases involving unnamed inmates, but one inmate's circumstances match Mitchell's case, and his attorney confirmed it was connected to the Mitchell death. Jones will be arraigned later this month. He could face up to life in prison. One of the most frustrating aspects of fighting crime in some areas is the public's reluctance to help police. Notably in Birmingham, law enforcement leaders and city officials have long begged citizens to speak up if they have information about a crime. Well, it could be that folks' distaste for the criminal element is starting to outweigh their distaste for getting involved. AL.com's Carol Robinson reports that metro area Crime Stopper statistics show there were more tips called in during the first half of this year than there were all of last year. Metro area Crime Stoppers chairman Frank Bearfield said tips from January through June led to 157 arrests in felony cases in the Birmingham area. Crime Stoppers broke a monthly record in April by paying out $13,250 in rewards for tips received. He said those tips led to 32 felony arrests and clearing 99 cases that included murder, armed robbery, kidnapping, rape, and drug trafficking. Now, there's an ongoing joint operation with Birmingham Police and U.S. Marshals that's resulted in the arrests of 23 homicide suspects since May. The dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico grew into a large one this summer, about the size of New Jersey, reports AL.com's Margaret Cates. It's bigger than it's been since 2019 and thousands of square miles above the 5-year average. While the area meeting the criteria to be called a dead zone is off the Louisiana coast, the nutrients coming out of the Mississippi River that cause the dead zone also can affect the levels of dissolved oxygen in the water off the Alabama Gulf Coast as well. Those nutrients include nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizer that makes its way into the Mississippi River. And since a big river drains between a third and half the continental United States, that's a lot of nutrients. They feed algae, which then grows like a weed in the Gulf, eventually dying as it decomposes. The algae uses up the oxygen in the water. That kills off the less mobile species and causes fish to swim elsewhere. This year, that dead zone measured 6,705 square miles, or more than 4 million acres. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. After that, we're going to talk politics, and we'll be polite about it. And then we're going to do the news review quiz. Y'all stick around. Hello, my fellow Alabamians. I want to take a quick break to talk about something that I know y'all are into because you listen to this podcast: the role of news in your daily routine. Well, starting off the day informed is a long-held practice that started with newspapers and coffee and has evolved to podcasts like this one and driving to work. But if you miss the feeling of sitting down with in-depth local reporting, Consider subscribing to the Huntsville Times, Birmingham News, or Mobile Press Register digital editions. By subscribing, you'll get a new daily digital edition in an email link, or you can use an app to download the new edition every day on your smartphone or tablet. You also get exclusive access to stories written for our subscribers. Down in Alabama listeners, get your first month free by going to al.com/digital subscription/exclusive and enter the promo code DIA24. Down in Alabama 24. You get that. It's just $10 a month after that to support the reporting that changes laws and lives in our state. Thank you for your support. And now back to the podcast. Well, thanks for coming back, everybody. Today, we have a familiar voice to you on the show, John Hammontree. We had a few thoughts about politics, and we don't talk a whole lot of politics here, but there's so much to think about. And first of all, I wanted to start. Well, first of all, John, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be back. Hopefully, neither of us will say anything here that'll get us too many angry emails or tweets, but we'll see.
Well, you can't fear that.
I have a history of ticking people off, but usually I try to be an equal opportunity ticker offer.
I'm going to start with a self-indulgent report on my own civic duty. I moved to a new county recently, still in Alabama, and just this week received my voter information card, which is a big moment. So now I know where to vote if I choose to. And I've been a politics and policy geek going back. I was probably 8 years old. You know, it's probably why in college I made an ill-fated decision to leave engineering for economics and a part-time job at a newspaper. But this past week of the presidential campaign shows us exactly why national politics drive me crazy. These things have always involved dumb stuff that hit with late night talk shows and that I've joined in and laughed about also. But now we have an evidently well circulated talking point to call Republicans weird for whatever good that does, and a former president whose pressing concerns seem to involve how well his opponent has embraced her Indian heritage versus her black heritage. And by the way, Project 2025 are recommendations from a think tank. Washington is literally filled with Project 2025s now, but that's okay. We don't need to talk the issues. They want me to not vote, John.
Well, you are, I think, like a lot of Americans have been for most of this election cycle, which is, checked out. And for most of this year, it looked like we were just getting a rematch of 2020. And then the last 4 or 5 weeks have been the craziest weeks in modern political history, starting with the Biden camp's ill-fated decision to challenge Donald Trump to a debate earlier in the cycle than anybody had ever done a presidential debate before, a debate in which he looked terrible, and there were immediate calls for him to resign. And then, of course, there was the attempted assassination on President Trump. And then there was the bombshell decision of Biden to heed those calls to step down and endorse Kamala Harris. And it's just been unlike anything I can ever really remember seeing. People make comparisons to 1968. I certainly wasn't around for 1968 elections, but I think that we are pretty far off the map here in terms of what politics looks like. And that's not even counting, you go back a few more weeks and you have President Trump being convicted on 34 felony counts. And so it's just what had been a very boring election cycle where I think a lot of people had tuned out has suddenly become just nonstop news and action.
Yeah, well, the most important point I want to make there is I was not around in 1968 either. You're smarter than the average bear on this stuff, and you're no newcomer to politics. You say you've never seen anything like it. Is there anything even close in your lifetime?
I mean, no, certainly not. I think this is obviously the third time we have seen Trump go through a presidential campaign. And in the 2016 campaign, he was sort of the outsider and the insurgent. 2020, he was the incumbent. And I think now, it's fair to say that he has remade the Republican Party 8 years later fully in Trumpism. You look at the Republican National Convention, the Bushes weren't there, the Romneys weren't there, the Cheneys weren't there, Mike Pence wasn't there. All of the kind of stalwarts of the Republican Party that I grew up paying attention to have walked away from the party or been driven away from the party, and instead you've got Donald Trump and Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock, and it's just a very different party than when I was growing up, and you had Bob Dole and the Bushes, and then Mitt Romney and John McCain. And so I think that it's been, that is different this cycle, that the Republican Party is fully in lockstep behind Trump in a way that they weren't even 4 years ago, and certainly weren't 8 years ago. And then on the Democratic side, you had a candidate who people had zero enthusiasm about, but felt resigned to support because he was the incumbent. And all of a sudden, I think this splash of cold water in people's faces and the change in the ticket has led to, I don't want to overstate it, but there haven't been crowds like this for Democrats since 2008 with Obama. And I think some of that is that Kamala Harris, despite being the incumbent, gets to tap into that spirit of insurgency that people liked about Trump in 2016 and people liked about Bernie in 2016 and people liked about Obama in 2008, where you feel like, the establishment had to drop their preferred candidate. The establishment wanted Hillary Clinton in 2008, and instead there was an insurgent candidacy in Obama. The establishment wanted Jeb Bush in 2016, and instead there was Trump. The establishment wanted Joe Biden in 2024, and instead, he had to resign, and there's Kamala Harris. And that plus her historic candidacy seems to have unleashed a wave of enthusiasm that has turned this race back into a true toss-up. Maybe not here in Alabama, certainly not here in Alabama, but nationwide.
Yeah, I keep expecting Ross Perot to show up. I mean, that's your insurgent right there.
That's right. That's right.
These national politics always play into local politics. Oh, let me make a quick point. Something that I feel like I've seen. You used to always say all politics is local. I feel like national left-right politics are so easy to follow, such low-hanging fruit that have devolved into just knowing a few insults and, talking points, that all politics are national now. So you have people on school boards criticizing Obama or Trump or what have you. I mean, it really has got to the point where it's all about D's and R's in a large part. We have a district. We have a District 2, Alabama's second congressional district race that was redrawn to favor the Democrats so that black voters, this is in theory, get a better shot at getting their candidate in office in a second district in Alabama. How do you feel like that's going? What are your thoughts on District 2 and what it might mean for the change in political face of Alabama?
Well, it's interesting to have a competitive race, a truly competitive race for the first time since 2010 in Alabama. We haven't had. I mean, Terry Sewell is always going to win District 7, and then historically, at least for the last decade, Republicans are always going to win the other 6 districts, and it's not going to be particularly close. And this district was drawn in such a way that it is meant to favor minority voters, which you would think would favor Democrats, but it's not as clear of a split as District 7. And so this is a competitive race, and I think the way things were trending 5 or 6 weeks ago, when Biden was on the decline, there wasn't a lot of excitement about him. You could certainly see a scenario where maybe Caroline Dobson, despite being the underdog in terms of the makeup of the district, becomes the favorite in terms of, which party is enthusiastic. It certainly seems possible that having a black woman on the ticket as a Democrat now has led to a balance in that enthusiasm, or even, an imbalance with the Democrats having more enthusiasm now that maybe the district is now back to favoring Shamari figures.
I did talk to John yesterday, John Sharp, and he had this to say over what he's seen so far in this campaign since all these changes took place. Ear to the ground. Have you seen a change in campaign strategy or energy on either side? How do we see how this is affecting the campaign yet?
Well, there's really no polling right now to indicate how this is affecting the campaign. All I can go with is what some of these national prognosticators have indicated, like Cook Political Report and Sabato's Crystal Ball. They have really looked at this. They haven't really altered their viewpoints on this particular race. They see, the fact that if you take the second district as it's been redrawn, most of the time it would vote for a Democratic presidential candidate during a presidential election. Joe Biden would have won this district by 12 points in 2020.
Uh-huh.
It says a lot in the state of Alabama. So it's viewed comfortably by the national folks as Democratic. Energy wise, I have not seen any major shift. One thing I've noticed from the Dobson campaign is that there was a press release sent out today, kind of reiterating her stance on IVF and kind of taking a shot at the Figures camp and the National Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee for what she claims is taking her viewpoints or her stance out of context. She says, she's very supportive of IVF, but she felt the need to send out a news release. That's a very difficult issue for Republicans right now nationally. Abortion rights are proving to be. And I think the Harris campaign has really kind of shot that issue again back into the spotlight. And so maybe that might have some element of effect there. But right now, it's for a lot of these down ballot races, it's a little too early. I hate to say that. I mean, we're under 100 days now to the election.
Yeah.
But there will be that sprint that begins usually after Labor Day. We're not there yet. Kids got to go back to school. Parents got to get back. Teachers got to get back to work. They're just not in tune with these down ballot races. They see the presidential race. They're interested. Of course, we have the Democratic National Convention coming up in August. But right now, for these down ballot races, really, it's kind of a wait for post Labor Day activity, and I think that's when we'll really get an impression on that.
Yeah, and I don't even know that we were real clear on this earlier. The Republican running for District 2 is Caroline Dobson. The Democrat is Shamari Figures. I don't know if we said their names all at one time earlier, but that's the race there. Any more thoughts?
It also kind of comes down to Montgomery versus Mobile, and who can turn out their bases in those areas. Theoretically, Mobile and the surrounding neighborhoods may be more historically Republican, and then Montgomery may be more historically Democrat. So it's kind of interesting that they're coming from different spots there. But yeah, no, I think John is spot on. It's hard to know right now how this is going to go. I do think that, we saw a big statewide spike in voting with the 2008 election of Obama, because there were a lot of black belt voters and voters in Birmingham and Montgomery and Mobile, and all across the state that were turning out in historic numbers to vote for a historic candidacy. But then it's never really dropped off since then. Huge numbers in 2016, huge numbers in 2020. I expect it'll be huge numbers now, and Trump is going to turn out people, and there might be people who will turn out specifically for Kamala Harris that would not have turned out for Joe Biden. So it'll be interesting to see how it all goes down, and that will be the one race to watch in Alabama that night.
That's really interesting what you say about parts of the Montgomery area and parts of the Mobile area are in this district. I know the courts decided this is more fair and equitable. At the same time, can't we come up with a computer model that will actually draw non-gerrymandered districts? Because this district, look, this is analysis. I'm not on one side or the other. It's totally gerrymandered too, right?
Of course,
just in a way that the courts like. Yeah.
Yeah. I think some states, I think Michigan may be one of them. Some states have had bipartisan commissions that have said, all right, we're going to let computers draw fair districts. I think that would be a much better system. Because, our state politics would be better if we all lived in purple districts. This is me on my soapbox, but you're going to get candidates that run towards the center if they live in purple districts versus if you live in a ruby red district or a bright blue district, then you're going to run to the whichever end you need to win that primary. And I know that nationwide you're seeing all of the resources go into 6 or 7 states, and a lot of money is going to be spent in North Carolina, and a lot of money is going to be spent in Georgia, and not a lot of money is going to be spent in Alabama. And maybe that's nice because then you don't have a political ad every 30 seconds on TV. But that also translates down to a lot of money gets spent by businesses in those states. Before I worked in journalism, I worked in public affairs in DC, and a lot of my clients were in banking. And at the time, Richard Shelby was a ranking member on the banking committee, and Spencer Bacchus was head of the financial services committee in the House. And so I would say, hey, why not do one of your pilot programs in Alabama? And they would say, oh, well, we know how Alabama's going to vote. We always know how Alabama's going to vote. We need to put these programs in states where we might be able to actually affect some influence. And so if you are reliably one way or the other, then you are leaving opportunities on the table. And so, there's going to be a lot of investment in states like Georgia because they want to affect Georgia politicians, and states like North Carolina, and some of that will leave us behind. And it's always nice to have, an advocate on both sides of the aisle. We got a lot of stuff coming in here when we had both Doug Jones and Richard Shelby in the Senate, and so I think having more parity statewide only benefits us as citizens, no matter how hard it is to take off your Democrat or Republican jersey when we think of things in the Auburn and Alabama style.
Yeah, and the tricky part mathematically with that is if you created 7 perfectly equally purple districts, Republicans would kill. And they would be thrilled with that because it would the statewide averages. So, if you really drew something up that way, it would make it even more one-sided. So the argument would be, would you create some kind of method of drawing from the different urban centers or geographically? So that's why we just gerrymander until the courts complain about it, I guess. It is Friday, and we do have a quiz to give the folks because we've been doing that almost every week, and people seem to like it, and I have a lot of fun. I don't have my buzzers on the desk right now because you've taken the quiz. We're not going to put you on the hot seat, but I thought we could talk through them, and I'll bet you know all the answers anyway. So you want to let's do this?
Yeah, let's do it. I feel like I'm on the hot seat even if you're being nice about it. So I'm here to play.
Let's start out with question number 1. Let's go international with this one. Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, in what Birmingham's Vulcan Materials and U.S. politicians say is an effort to illegally take property away from Vulcan in the Yucatan Peninsula, announced these plans recently. A, to have the entire area zoned for international tourism. B, to designate the entire local coastal area as vital geographically to to national defense, C, to designate the property as a naturally protected area, or D, to place local bans on fried chicken, buttermilk biscuits, and television access during football games?
I think that it is C.
Oh, to designate the property as a naturally protected area. That is absolutely right. Question number 2. There are currently 3 aluminum Singing River statues of unnamed musicians in Shoals area cities. They include a jazz trumpeter in Florence, a 1950s era singer in Sheffield, and one in Muscle Shoals playing this: A, slide guitar, B, bass guitar, C, keyboards, or D, banjo. Give the folks just a little
Whew,
moment to
that's
think
a
about
hard
that.
one.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, that's what we're going for here.
I'm going to guess that it's a slide guitar. A.
You're wrong, but that's a great guess, because as we all know, Dwayne Allman was one of the great slide guitarists of all time, and he did tons
And he
of
learned it
session
there,
work.
right?
I believe so. He was like sick in bed and just had a medicine bottle, and that's what he used as his first slide. That's what's been written.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was the slide guitar. So what is it?
Oh, it's the bass guitar. He's playing bass.
Bass guitar.
Yeah, I don't know whether that one is based off anybody. These statues aren't particular people, but they're sort of like influenced by some of the folks from the area who've made
I
their
should have
mark.
guessed that because of the rhythm section and all of that and Muscle Shoals sound, but it was the Dwayne Allman that made me think it was the slide guitar. Okay, all right.
That's right.
So I'm 1-1.
All right, number 3. Fined motorists will be refunded after an apparent malfunctioning of this city's traffic speed detection cameras. A, Brantley, B, Tuskegee, C, Demopolis, or D, Ozark.
Ooh, I have not been paying as
Yeah,
much
we're digging
attention
deep.
as I should have.
We're
I'm going to
digging
say
deep this
C,
week.
Demopolis.
Demopolis. Demopolis is not the right answer. Tuskegee is. They use
Okay,
a
all right.
they used a system, I believe, from Germany, and it has doled out tickets like crazy. People have gotten multiple fines and all that business. So the only place that I think a lot of people have knowingly seen these cameras set up on the way to the coast, Brantley, famously. I
Yeah.
mean, they really display it big, and you see how fast you're going, and they do the electronic tickets. The folks will get back home in Huntsville and have a ticket waiting in the mail for them. All right,
I got to
question number
watch for that
4.
next time.
You may make sure, watch yourself in Brantley. Former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell's widow, Alma, passed away recently at age 86. The Powells honeymooned in this Alabama location. A, the Ben Moore Hotel in Montgomery. B, the A.G. Gaston Motel in Birmingham. C, a cabin outside Fort McClellan. Or D, camping on the Chattahoochee River. You going to take a shot here?
Yeah, I mean, him being military background makes me think maybe Fort McClellan, but when he was growing up, it seems like one of the few places he might have been able to do that in Alabama would have been the A.G. Gaston Motel. So I'm gonna guess B, but I don't feel great about it.
I think that is a very good educated guess and an accurate one. They
Okay,
Alma
all right.
Alma Powell was from Birmingham, and they stayed at the H.E. Gaston Motel in Birmingham. I don't know if he ever was at Fort McClellan, but it was an Army installation, so we threw that one in there. And question number 5, last one. What Alabama waterway is about to undergo a decades-long cleanup process because of its longtime PCB pollution? See, I'm proud of this quiz. It's not an easy quiz.
You're not messing around this time.
I did not mess around. A, Choccolocco Creek. B, Village Creek. C, the Little Choctawhatchee River. Or D, Buzzard Roost Creek.
That one is Choccolocco Creek.
It is absolutely right. That might have been Dennis Pillion's last story for us before he left us for other work. John,
gone but not forgotten.
Gone but definitely not forgotten. We may have him back here. You did great on maybe the most difficult quiz yet.
Well, my average has gone down. Last time I think I got 4 out of 5, and this time 3 out of 5. So,
some of these you absolutely have to see. Then others, like the Gaston Motel, you figure out by knowing Alabama. Yeah, thanks for doing it. That was fun. Thanks for our political discussion. I don't think we would have made anybody mad unless they take. We'll do this again sometime soon, folks. Thanks for listening to us today. And all week, we're going to be back here bright and early Monday morning. Until then, we're open 24 hours a day and 7 days a week on the World Wide Web at al.com.